Ellie. You go. I go. End of story.
Welcome back to my series where I analyze characters, scenes, and story elements from The Last of Us Part 2 in order to deepen our understanding of this story as well as certain facets of storytelling in general. Today I'm going to be analyzing a scene which has been highly requested since I started making these videos, and that is this scene between Ellie and Dina.
I have to finish it.
This scene comes after Tommy showed up at the farm with information about Abby's whereabouts. If you'd like an analysis of that scene, it's already up on my channel. At this point in the player's experience of the story, it's become clear that the farm chapter is not as peaceful and idyllic as it first appeared to be. Ellie has been suffering from PTSD and flashbacks to the day that Joel died, and she has been struggling to eat, sleep, and generally to function on a day-to-day basis. As a result, her relationship with Dina has become strained, and though Dina tries her best to keep it all together, everyone has their breaking point. This breakup and Dina's subsequent vacancy of the farm has been polarizing in the Last of Us community, with seemingly half the players vilifying Dina for leaving and the other half believing that they actually got back together off screen. I'm actually of the opinion that their relationship ending was not only the best course of action for both characters, but was actually inevitable and foreshadowed from the very beginning. I also think that, despite its more toxic qualities, this relationship is largely romanticized by the community in a way that somewhat detracts from the nuance of it and puts rose-colored glasses on an unhealthy dynamic. The Last of Us Part 2 is a tragedy, and although Dina and Ellie's relationship does feature many unforgettable moments and is hugely important in terms of gay representation in games, a happy ending for them was unfortunately never in the cards. There are many ingredients that contribute to the breakdown of Ellie and Dina's relationship, so we will need to look back at multiple moments throughout their story in order to properly analyze the breakup scene. But first, let's talk about each of them individually. Dina is a pretty popular character in the Last of Us community, and it's easy to see why. She's charming, kind, and many would say is Ellie's ride-or-die companion during her trek to Seattle. Indeed, she is a pillar of support for Ellie throughout the story, nursing her wounds both seen and unseen. In many ways, she is also Ellie's moral compass, continually attempting to steer Ellie away from the darkness her revenge quest is drawing her into. But like all the characters in this game, Dina isn't perfect. She possesses strengths and flaws just like everyone else. But where the other characters' flaws may have more tangible or external consequences, Dina's, for the most part, will predominantly take their toll on herself. We don't have many details about Dina's life before she came to Jackson. We do know she grew up living a mostly nomadic life in and around New Mexico. She didn't live in a QZ like Ellie did. Instead, she frequently traveled from place to place with her mother and her older sister Talia. This means she was exposed to the realities of the world beyond a QZ's walls much earlier than Ellie was, and lost her innocence sooner. When Dina was 10 years old, she killed a man in order to protect her mother, a memory which she looks back on somberly. It's not specified when or how it happened, but at some point Dina's mother died. Her sister Talia then became more fearful and paranoid, suffered from night terrors, and began moving the pair more frequently. She and Dina avoided QZs and densely populated areas, and never stayed in the same place for more than a few weeks. Dina struggled with this and yearned for stability, but it's implied that Dina had to take on the role of caretaker for Talia as her mental health deteriorated. Coupled with having to murder someone at a young age in order to protect her mother, this led Dina to develop a premature sense of responsibility for things she won't always be able to control or prevent, and an instinct to prioritize others' needs above her own. It also means that she has experience caring for someone with mental health struggles, and that Dina has already had to circumvent her own well-being in order to do so. Tragically though, Dina eventually lost Talia too, and it's implied that Talia's life ended violently. Somehow, Dina wound up in Jackson alone. Orphaned and with no family left, Dina recalls feeling overwhelmed by all the people in the town, as it was likely far more than she was used to seeing in one place. She was already living in Jackson when Ellie and Joel decided to settle there permanently.
When I first got to Jackson, I was so overwhelmed by all the people.
I was overwhelmed by all the food. I remember my first week just gorging myself, stuffing food in all my pockets for later like it was gonna run out.
I saw that.
You did not.
I did. I remember thinking, Who is this string bean girl stealing all the jerky?
I didn't steal that much jerky.
What?
What's wrong with you?
What about her manners?
In my video analyzing Tommy, I mentioned traditional character archetypes and how Tommy follows the hero archetype and Joel the caregiver. I believe that Dina falls into the lover archetype. In Jungian psychology, the lover possesses a great capacity for relating, emotional openness, and a desire for connection with others. But like all archetypes, Dina possesses a shadow, Jung's interpretation of someone's repressed id or inner blind spot that contradicts their outward ego. When unbalanced, the lover tends to struggle with codependency, idealization, and an inability to set healthy boundaries. Dina's driving motivator is to maintain deep connections with the people she loves in order to build a home and foster a sense of permanency, particularly following her unmoored and traumatic childhood. Her fatal flaw is in her need to be useful, to be needed, and the self-sacrifice she is willing to enact in order to facilitate that. We see this exemplarized in Dina's relationship with Ellie, and might be a pattern of behavior stemming from her past. Since Dina already lost her entire family once, she is going to do everything in her power not to lose the people she cares about again. And of course, we know that one of Ellie's biggest fears is being alone too. This can lead to a meaningful connection built on mutual understanding. It may also mean each of them may avoid anything that might create opportunity for their worst fear to come true, including staying in an unhealthy relationship. Unlike Dina, Ellie was raised without a family or guardian and grew up at a federal military school in the Boston QZ. Where Dina lacked environmental stability, Ellie lacked emotional stability. She learned to be independent from a young age because she was, but she understandably also craved having someone to look out for her. For a time, that person was Riley, and then of course Joel came into the picture. Although Marlene kept an eye on Ellie from a distance, I get the sense she didn't offer Ellie much in terms of emotional support, likely because Marlene couldn't afford to become distracted from the Firefly's mission. Ellie grew up sheltered from the realities of the outside world, thinking she was destined to become another Fedra soldier in an authoritarian state. That all changed when her immunity was discovered and she left the QZ for the first time at 14 years old. Ellie's character archetype was a bit harder to discern because she possesses qualities from multiple archetypes such as the jester or the common person, but the one that rang true the most was actually the innocent. Also known as the child, the maiden, or the dreamer, at first it may seem surprising to categorize Ellie this way, or even to call her innocent at all after the events of the second game. But when you dig into the makeup of this archetype, particularly surrounding its darker side, it actually makes sense, especially when you take into consideration Ellie's journey since the first game. The innocent craves happiness, not only for themselves, but for everyone around them, and possesses a deep desire to make the world a better place. They have a firm moral code unique to their own beliefs, and a strong impulse to do what they believe is right. Though sometimes shy, the innocent's charisma and earnestness endears them to others, even if they aren't aware of it. They are deep thinkers, strong feelers, sensitive and empathetic, with the core belief that people are generally good. Often yet to truly find themselves, the innocent is much stronger than even they might be aware of. But, like all archetypes, the innocent has pitfalls and a shadow. Experience with hurt and disappointment prompts the innocent to develop defense mechanisms to prevent further pain. They often have a hard time forgiving mistakes, both their own and others. They have a tendency to daydream and wallow in negativity rather than take control of their life, which can lead to insecurity or a victim complex. And above all else, the innocent fears being rejected or abandoned and may develop unhealthy strategies to avoid that fear being realized. Now, that last part sounded oddly similar to the flaws I described with Dina's archetype, didn't it? That's because they are similar, especially in terms of their desires and fears, but their fundamental difference lies in how they go about achieving those desires and avoiding those fears. Like real people, Ellie is full of contradictions. She possesses a fierce desire for independence and to self-actualize, but she also needs an emotional anchor. After Joel betrays her trust and Ellie distances herself from him, Dina becomes her new anchor. However, her complicated relationship with Joel and the pattern of abandonment throughout her life has affected her ability to fully trust someone else. This is where the major conflict between Dina and Ellie comes in. Dina desires deep connection with the people she loves and will do almost anything to get it and keep it. Ellie fears that kind of connection because she has been hurt badly by someone she trusted, and the loss of her sense of purpose has affected her self-esteem to the point where she no longer believes she is worthy of that kind of love. She won't be able to fully open up to Dina and let her in until she has resolved her feelings towards Joel and herself, but unfortunately that revelation will come too late. Now that we have summed up what each of them have been through by the time the game starts, let's examine their relationship chronologically. I've picked several moments throughout the game to look at, keeping in mind their desires and fears as outlined in the previous sections. During Ellie's first year in Jackson, she and Dina became good friends. It's unclear at what point Dina and Jesse started dating, but a year later, during a Finding Strings flashback, they were together on what Ellie called an off and on basis. At that point, Ellie herself was dating a girl named Kat, and her journal entries recount Dina distancing herself and avoiding spending time with them, despite Ellie's frequent invites for her to tag along. It's not explicitly stated, but I get the impression that no one, perhaps including Dina herself, knew that she was queer until she started developing feelings for Ellie. Ellie getting together with Kat coincides with Dina and Jesse being on again off again, and I can't help but wonder if those things are related. Perhaps Ellie becoming unavailable for the first time and dating somebody else forced Dina to reckon with her feelings in a way that disrupted her relationship with Jesse. Ellie, meanwhile, probably also had a crush on Dina, but didn't think there was ever a chance anything would ever come of it. All at once, because Dina was already in a relationship, Ellie may not have known Dina was queer, Dina had a reputation of being a bit of a flirt, and Ellie had a pretty poor sense of self-esteem by that point. 2 years later, a week before the Jackson winter dance, Jesse and Dina broke up for good. Sometime during that week, Jackson had a bonfire night, and Ellie all but serenaded Dina on her guitar.
You should have kissed me then. I wanted to.
The night of the winter dance, Ellie psyched herself up before arriving and only showed up because she knew Dina would be there. Ever since the bonfire night, Ellie has had a gut feeling that something might happen between them, even if part of her can't quite let herself believe it.
She's putting on quite the show.
I give you guys 2 weeks until you're back together.
Not gonna happen. She, say something to you?
Make it 1 week.
At first, it seems like Jesse is fishing for information about what Dina may have said about him after their breakup, but now I'm wondering if he's trying to discern whether Dina has yet confessed her feelings to Ellie. None of this is ever confirmed, but I just get the feeling that Jesse knew what was up, that he was privy to Dina's coming out journey and knew of her feelings for Ellie. This would explain why he was so chill about them getting together only a week after he and Dina broke up. He's an ally.
Talk, Valentina. Ally.
Every guy in this room is staring at you right now.
Maybe they're staring at you.
Or not.
Maybe they're jealous of you.
I'm just a girl, not a threat.
Oh, Ellie. I think they should be terrified of you.
This moment is essentially Dina coming out to Ellie right before kissing her. When Ellie says she's not a threat, but is instead just a girl, she means the men in the room will have no competition with her when it comes to winning over Dina's affections, because Ellie doesn't yet know for certain that Dina is interested in girls. When Dina retorts that they should be terrified, she's confirming that it's really no contest anyway. Ellie has already won her over.
Remember next time there's kids around.
Yeah, like you're setting such a great example.
Oh, just what this town needs. Another luck.
Though this slur was aimed at Dina, Seth using the word another means he's also leveling the insult at Ellie. Since the rest of the town knows at this point that Ellie is gay, Ellie may feel a sense of responsibility and guilt for Dina experiencing this hateful behavior, even though it of course was not her fault. After arguing with Joel, who came to her defense, Ellie abruptly left the event, presumably to go talk to him, but we'll cover that conversation in another video.
I just want to say sorry for running off last night.
Oh, it's okay. I totally get it. I felt bad.
Why?
Because I started the whole thing, and I shouldn't have kissed you in front of all of those people.
No, you were drunk. It's fine.
Well, still, I don't want you to think.
No, I'm not reading into it or anything.
As a defense mechanism against being hurt, Ellie had already made up her mind that Dina only kissed her because she was drunk and or to get back at Jesse, and didn't actually have feelings for her. Ellie views this exchange as confirmation of all those things, reading Dina's remorse at having embarrassed Ellie as regret for having kissed her at all, when that's not actually what Dina's saying. This rocky start to Ellie and Dina's relationship, characterized by drama, unspoken truths, and self-doubt, only foreshadows their issues to come. A fresh start was needed, and luckily the opportunity came the next day when Jesse sent them off on patrol together.
Ally.
You miss being with him?
With Jesse? No.
You've been together for so long.
Look, Jesse's great. I love his parents. They will always be family, but we were just on autopilot.
Since Dina didn't have a parent or even a Joel looking out for her, her relationship with Jesse's family was very important to her.
Hey, how come we never talked about this stuff?
I don't know. It didn't feel...
It didn't feel right, comfortable, appropriate, because they both had crushes on each other and didn't want to talk about their respective relationships.
What do you think of this view, huh?
It's pretty nice.
Yeah, this route has its perks.
Where do we sign in?
Come on.
Slowly, Ellie is starting to accept that Dina's feelings and their kiss from the previous night may be real. The tension between them, the nervous energy, is so perfectly captured during this sequence, and is both endearing and frustrating. So much of this uncertainty would be avoided if they simply talked to each other more directly about their feelings, but of course that's easier said than done in a situation like this, which is what makes it so charming and relatable. It's also nice to see Ellie experience such a recognizably adolescent thing when this world has stripped her of so many milestone teenage experiences.
Dina, where are you?
On the way to the library, Ellie briefly gets separated from Dina in the blizzard. This moment foreshadows issues to come in Dina and Ellie's relationship. Ellie losing sight of Dina, who ran off ahead, reflects their dynamic in the farm chapter, when Ellie will have lost the ability to prioritize the relationship, while she believes Dina is leagues ahead of her in terms of coping with the trauma they've been through. Ellie believes Dina has her shit together and knows which direction to go in, while she still feels lost in that storm.
How would you rate our kiss from last night?
Why are we still talking about this? You said it was a mistake.
Did I say that?
Did she, though?
I shouldn't have kissed you in front of all of those people.
No, you were drunk. It's fine.
Well, still, I don't want you to think...
No, I'm not reading into it or anything. Just... What are you doing?
You to rate our kiss?
I don't know.
It's interesting to watch Ellie vacillate between confident and not in this scene. In a way, she is attempting to force Dina to be more direct, almost as though Ellie won't be able to believe Dina's feelings until Dina explicitly states them. As I'm sure so can a lot of people, I can relate to this so hard. But Dina is nervous too, feeling perhaps as though she's made several moves already and is waiting for Ellie to reciprocate. They're in a game of chicken, dancing around the subject waiting for the other to just come out with it.
I give it a 6.
A 6? Wow.
Like a solid 6.
Okay.
There are a lot of people around.
Yeah, but 6.
Oh, what? I mean, now I really want to know how you'd rate it.
I don't think you do.
Initially offended by the rating of a 6, Ellie then plays it off as though it was worse than that as a way to tease Dina, which understandably is why Dina then says,
"You're infuriating."
Have you met you?
You make me want to go back outside into that blizzard.
No one is stopping you.
As adorable as this scene is, as I mentioned earlier, every early interaction between Ellie and Dina speaks to how their relationship will break down later on. Their communication is, decidedly, not great. They're not direct or explicit with their feelings, instead resorting to teasing and insults even as they're about to kiss. Poor communication is a pretty common relationship killer, and unfortunately it will become a pattern for Ellie and Dina. To be fair though, they aren't the only characters in this series to be somewhat stunted in their communication skills, especially the post-outbreak generation who grew up learning how to survive rather than communicate effectively. I mentioned in a previous video that I believe this is Ellie's first time having sex. Some people disagreed with me in the comments, citing Ellie's earlier relationship with Kat. Not only was that relationship when Ellie was 17, which doesn't mean she couldn't be sexually active at that age, but it's less likely. Ellie gushes in her journal entries at the time about kissing and holding hands with Kat, but never once mentioned going further than that. Since kissing was such a big deal to Ellie, who freaked out about it when it first happened, thinking thinking she might infect Kat. I feel quite certain that had something more advanced happened, Ellie would have written about it in her journal. And story-wise, since we have witnessed Ellie growing up and experiencing some of the more normal canon adolescent events like crushing on a friend, awkward social encounters, and beefing with the older generation, I think it's only fitting that we as the audience would bear witness to this significant moment in Ellie's life. On the other hand, we know that this isn't Dina's first time having sex, but it could be her first time having sex with a woman. There's no real evidence to indicate either way, but given that she has been with Jesse for years, the rest of the town and Ellie didn't seem to know Dina was queer, and these people are only 19 in an apocalypse, I think it's very likely. Of course, this is a significant moment for Dina either way, since she's had a crush on Ellie for years and is finally seeing it come to fruition. This moment is also a very high for Ellie, getting confirmation her crush likes her back, hooking up for the first time, literally being high. This is all in sharp contrast to the events that will unfold in the story beats to come. The best day of Ellie's life is swiftly going to become the worst.
A chemical burn. I did it myself.
Why?
To cover a bite mark?
This is an immensely vulnerable moment for Ellie, and the first test of trust she makes with Dina. Emotions and hormones are running high. Though Ellie has bared her body to Dina now, choosing to share her biggest secret with Dina is exposing herself in an even more meaningful way. It's a huge indicator of the depth of Ellie's feelings for Dina. They were close friends before they became romantic partners, but now their relationship has reached a new level, one that Ellie has not reached with anyone else, including Kat, with whom Ellie didn't share her secret even as Kat was covering it up with Ellie's tattoo. In the Finding Strings flashback 2 years prior, Joel made it a point to ensure Ellie hadn't disclosed her secret to even her closest friends. Sharing this information with Dina is an act of reclaiming her own story, not out of defiance to Joel, but as an indication that her sentiments towards her immunity may be starting to shift, especially since this is the morning after Ellie's final conversation with Joel. Rather than simply viewing her scar and the immunity it signifies as something to feel resentful or ashamed about, something to hide and cover up, Ellie is beginning to accept it as simply a part of her and her story, one that she wants to share with Dina.
Ow! Fuck you.
What? Hey!
I told you a real fucking story.
I did tell you a real fucking story.
Oh, you want a bite mark?
This definitely wasn't the worst reaction Ellie may have been expecting, but it also wasn't fantastic. I think their mutual use of sarcasm and humor has made it so that it may be difficult to tell when the other is being serious. This was a moment where Dina could have fully earned Ellie's trust, but it didn't happen. Ellie walked out on a limb and then it snapped, so she's gonna be more tight-lipped with her secrets going forward. But it's understandable why Dina responded this way. Someone being immune to the CBI, as far as she has ever known, is not even in the realm of possibility. To her, this confession feels so outlandish that it could only be a joke.
I remember how, Shannon, how angry you were at Steven.
I wasn't angry at Steven. I couldn't tell why I was mad, and then this was the only real thing I actually fought for was this. Was to make him turn around. It was the only thing I argued with you about. And it was because I felt so protective of Ashley that I knew it was right. That I was like, because we were so close, that I was like, turn around, she's naked. Like,
yes,
you know,
because you guys knew each other intimately, but yeah, Ellie and...
Exactly, and because I had to, like, I wanted to prove to you that I was loyal to you and not embarrassed because he was there.
This is an early expression of Dina's fierce protectiveness, particularly towards Ellie. She's willing to put herself into awkward and later dangerous situations to protect Ellie at her own expense. Like Shannon said, Dina wants to prove to Ellie that she is loyal to her, and she will continue to prove that throughout their journey together in the story. While Dina's loyalty is definitely one of her strengths and a noble characteristic, I do think it ties into her fatal flaw too. After splitting up from Jesse resulted in a degree of separation from his parents, who had become her family, Dina is clinging to the next person who shows her love, and Dina will do everything in her power to keep Ellie by demonstrating how loyal, supportive, and useful she can be. This notion is only solidified when Ellie and Dina become bound by a traumatic event.
Oh my god. Ellie?
Ellie. I'm sorry. Jesse! They're down here!
Dina was the first to discover Joel's body, and maybe for a moment she might have thought Ellie and Tommy were dead too. Even though most people in this world have seen lots of death, finding the body of someone you know or care about is still extremely traumatic. She may not have seen Joel's murder take place like Ellie did, but she saw the aftermath firsthand. I think it's important to link Dina to this moment as a first responder, because afterwards she is immediately on board to accompany Ellie to Seattle to get revenge. They are bound forever by this experience. If you watched my video analyzing Owen and Abby's relationship, I mentioned that going through something traumatic with someone can accelerate your closeness to them and create a bond based on mutual empathy for the shared traumatic experience. I think this is paralleled in Ellie and Dina's relationship, who also went through something horrific together early on in their romance, which interfered with a more natural relationship progression.
Ellie. You go. I go.
As I suggested at the beginning of this video, I think this moment both officially establishes Ellie and Dina's relationship and also foreshadows the end of it. Dina, who herself understands the grief of losing someone important in a violent way, does a great job of letting Ellie know she's there to support her while still giving her space and not smothering her. I've seen a lot of people refer to Dina as Ellie's ride or die, and I think at this point in the story that's almost literal. She has insisted on joining Ellie on this dangerous cross-country trip where anything could happen anytime, and is quite literally risking her life to stay by Ellie's side. Moreover, Ellie is accepting her help. Both of them at this point have lost their families, and they need each other in more ways than one.
This hunter was on top of him, drowning him, and Joel couldn't get to his gun.
Jeez. Were you scared?
Well, I didn't even think. I just ran in there, grabbed his gun, and shot the guy in the face.
How old were you?
14. How old were you when you first killed someone?
We talking infected?
No. Fully conscious, non-fungal person.
10?
Wow. What happened?
Guy was coming at my mom. I stabbed him.
Shit. You got me beat.
Yeah, I'm a real badass.
Earlier on patrol, Ellie and Dina compared the amount of infected they had each come across while on their routes, as though they were counting the amount of birds they'd seen. It's the world they live in. No doubt swapping horror stories is a normalized thing in this world, but in this case, Ellie and Dina reflect on their individual experiences very differently. Ellie's recounting of her first kill is very detailed. She's telling it like it's a story. Dina, however, gives a very brief and removed explanation of hers. No dramatizing or embellishments. To me, it's clear she doesn't like to talk about it, and it's understandable why. While Ellie doesn't push her for details, her response is more akin to their earlier discussion where they kept score. And Dina's somewhat bitter reply tells us she does not view this particular moment of her past as part of any kind of game. It's a traumatic memory she is not proud of, and clearly not desensitized to. This isn't to say that Ellie's experience wasn't traumatic too. They just have different ways of dealing with it, and their different tactics will become a major contributor to the end of their relationship later on.
What about those crazy cannibals you said you and Joel ran into? They came after you guys once. Maybe these WLFs are connected to them.
No. It didn't seem like the same group.
Maybe those black market smugglers back in Boston?
Dina, Joel crossed a lot of people. I don't see the point in guessing.
Okay.
This early interaction in Seattle is actually the very first glimpse of conflict we get between these two, and already it demonstrates their different mindsets. Ellie isn't interested in theorizing on why Abby and her crew did what they did. Doing so could open the door for empathy to develop, and she can't afford that to cloud her tunnel vision. To her, the why doesn't matter anyway. Dina, on the other hand, has already concluded that Joel was targeted for a reason, and is trying to figure out what that reason could be. In a way, these two perspectives parallel a lot of players' responses to this game. Some saw Joel's murder as an unforgivable act and couldn't bring themselves to empathize with Abby even after learning her reasons, whereas others were curious about why she might have done it because, as Dina has observed, it certainly wasn't a random attack. It's also just about different perspectives and experiences of grief. Some people find explanations to be comforting and to bring closure, whereas others don't want to entertain the reasons why terrible things happen. Both are valid and part of human nature, but I do think it's one of the main reasons this game was so divisive, as it was definitely designed to challenge players to approach the story with empathy. This is the first time we'll have seen Ellie play guitar since Joel offered to teach her at the beginning of the game. I love watching all the emotions on Dina's face while she watches her play. You can see all the love and admiration all over it. I think this scene offers a nice reprieve from the misery and puts a little spotlight on their romance for a second. I also think the lyrics of this song are especially poignant, summarizing Ellie and Dina's relationship in just one line. Ellie sings, "Take me on," including all of her grief and baggage, everything that she is now, which Dina has already shown that she's willing to do, and will do for as long as she can. Ellie sings, "I'll be gone in a day or two," and tragically, in 2 days from now, the Ellie that Dina knows and loves will be gone.
This place brings back a lot of memories. My sister used to drag me to a synagogue all the time.
You never struck me as much of a believer.
Nah, but I like coming from a long line of survivors.
You mean after Outbreak Day?
That, and the Inquisition, and the Holocaust. My family always made it out alive. Barely.
Perhaps this is one of the ways Dina copes with any survivor's guilt at being the last remaining member of her family. It must also be a source of comfort to know that no matter what adversity presents itself, survival is always possible and worth fighting for, if only to carry on a legacy.
Do you still pray?
Sometimes.
Really? When?
I said one when we left Jackson. I said one at Joel's grave. Sometimes I just say little ones to myself.
Does it help?
I think it calms me. Helps me put things in perspective. It's a way to deal with grief. A way to show respect. It's what I know.
Here we get some information about one of Dina's coping strategies for grief. Since she's been grieving since she was young, her faith has become a comforting outlet for her. Her family's Jewish faith was important to Dina's sister Talia too, and so Dina may have had guidance on how to channel her energy through that lens. Ellie, on the other hand, didn't have a role model to demonstrate healthy coping strategies. All Ellie knows to do in that regard is to stifle and avoid.
I want to talk about it.
No.
Why not?
How many times do we need to go over this? Things happen, and we move on.
It's just...
That's enough.
You're right. I'm sorry.
I wonder what it was like to serve on a jury. But it was fun. Sit down, look at evidence, try to tell if somebody's lying.
Just give me 5 minutes and my knife. I'd tell you if they were lying or not.
Oh, wow, okay.
I'm not sure if this quip of Ellie's was meant to be taken seriously, but either way it's not entirely accurate, judging by 2 of the 3 instances we will see Ellie attempting to get information out of someone. And at this point in the story, Ellie hasn't done anything of this sort in her life. My guess is she was attempting to impress Dina here, perhaps, or engage in banter, but Dina was taken aback by it. After all, it's not every day your boo jokes about torturing someone, especially while on a quest to avenge someone she recently saw get tortured. That being said, Ellie specifically mentioned being able to tell whether someone was lying, and she does have a pretty good bullshit detector, and perhaps a certain sensitivity towards being lied to, for obvious reasons.
You know, I've always dreamed of fixing up a farm just outside of Jackson.
Why wouldn't you stay in town?
I don't know. I like the idea of real space.
Sounds lonely.
Only if you're doing it alone.
Okay. So are we gonna, like, raise sheep and milk cows?
Are you making fun of me?
No. It actually sounds kind of nice.
After growing up nomadic and always on the move, and Dina's initial take on Jackson being overwhelming, it makes sense that Dina would want to create a permanent home for herself, one that is entirely her own, away from prying eyes and town gossip. I also get the sense that she never intended to do this on her own, both for safety and practicality reasons, but also because of her desire for connection with others. This is her sussing out whether Ellie might be down to realize this dream with her, and Ellie accepts the prompt by automatically switching from you to we. Of course, this exchange foreshadows the farm chapter, but it also establishes that though Ellie was on board, it was initially Dina's dream.
This one's fresh, and he's got one of those wolf patches.
Guess they didn't make it out with their gas after all.
That's good, right?
If those fuckers who killed Joel got taken out by some random infected,
then they'd still be dead, Ellie.
I'm not sure that's justice.
To Ellie, this mission isn't just about making sure the Salt Lake crew are dead. She wants to kill them. And death by infected, as far as Ellie is concerned, is too lax a punishment for what they did. Ellie mentions justice, implying that she intends to even the score and anything less than that wouldn't be fair. This is the first time Dina pushes back against Ellie's conviction. She's reminding Ellie of what she believes to be the purpose of their trip, to avenge Joel by ensuring his killers die. Maybe until this point, Dina hadn't realized just how important it was to Ellie that she get to be the one to do it.
He's one of the ones that killed Joel. Are you okay?
It wasn't pretty.
I don't want you to think bad of Tommy.
Ellie, if I had my sister's killers tied to a chair, I'd do worse.
I hear you.
As I mentioned in my video about Tommy, Dina has only ever known Tommy as the peaceful and altruistic leader of Jackson, but Ellie knows more about Tommy's violent past, of the years he and Joel spent as hunters following the outbreak. I think by saying she doesn't want Dina to think badly of Tommy, by extension she also means Joel. And Dina's response here, about what she would do if she found her sister's killers, implies at once that Talia was indeed murdered, and that Dina understands the impulse to want to avenge a loved one, even if it comes at a violent cost. She empathizes with Tommy and she reaffirms her support for Ellie. But, as far as we know, Dina didn't actually pursue revenge when Talia was killed. She found other ways to cope with it, through prayer and connecting with other people. So while she understands why someone would want revenge in theory, she herself hasn't put it into practice in her own life. You know the saying, actions speak louder than words? It's one thing to fantasize about doing something like that. It's another thing entirely to actually enact it yourself. I talked about this in my video analyzing Mel, and how that lesson was learned by the Salt Lake crew members. In time, Ellie will come to learn this lesson too.
Gotcha, motherfucker! Are you okay? Mostly. Ellie. We should go. Somebody would have heard the gunshots. Look, she's one of them. Come on. Look at that later. Was there a TV station on that map? I don't fucking know. Come on. Fuck, Ellie.
While this isn't the first time Dina has ever seen Ellie kill a fully conscious, non-fungal person, it's perhaps the first time she's witnessed Ellie enjoy it. After being nearly blown up, separated from Ellie, and hunted by the WLF, Dina saved Ellie's life and almost lost her own. And instead of listening to Dina and hustling out of there, Ellie paused to study the clue she found of their next target, which put them both at risk. In the director commentary for this game, Shannon Woodward mentions that this is the first moment Dina realized that Ellie really isn't okay.
So, those are the wolves. They're really armed.
Yeah, they are. Do you think there were gonna be this many of them?
Tommy said this was a possibility.
Does that change anything for you?
No.
How are we gonna get Leah alone? This QZ is swarming.
We just need a minute to talk with her.
Are you gonna make her talk?
If I have to.
You gonna ask her why they did it?
Yeah.
Now that they've encountered the WLF and Dina has caught a glimpse of Ellie's mindset, she asks questions meant to gauge the strength of Ellie's conviction and whether there is anything that might make her change her mind. But the more Ellie affirms that she's still fully committed to getting this revenge, no matter the cost or how long it takes, the more anxious Dina becomes. Dina knows she doesn't have endless time. She already suspects that she is pregnant and symptoms are starting to present themselves. They won't be able to wander around Seattle for weeks or months trying to find these people.
You recognize him?
No. I don't recognize this one either.
You recognize any of them?
None.
You recognize any of these guys?
No.
Every WLF member they discover who isn't one of the 8 that attacked Joel increases the scope of this enemy faction. They have no idea that the WLF is thousands strong and highly militarized. They also have no idea that Abby and her crew were acting independently from the WLF in Jackson, and that in fact the WLF had nothing to do with Joel's death at all.
Something keeps bugging me. Why didn't they kill you and Tommy when they had the chance?
I don't know.
It seems reckless.
Maybe they're dumb.
Maybe.
What?
Could be that you just weren't who they were looking for. So they let you go.
Yeah, well, they did beat the shit out of us. The one guy, Jordan, kicked my face in.
Yeah, but why do you think that they didn't finish
It doesn't matter. They fucked up.
They did.
Similar to Dina pondering what part of Joel's past came back to haunt him, this conversation gets under Ellie's skin. Once again, Dina is questioning the motives of Abby and her crew. Once again, she is straying dangerously close to empathizing with them, or at least trying to understand them. While leaving Ellie and Tommy alive could be viewed as sloppy, it also sends a message, one that Dina has already inferred. They could have killed the witnesses, but they didn't. And Ellie, who has already begun to suspect that they're connected to the Fireflies, knows that that is something Joel hadn't been able to do himself at the hospital. He killed everyone who got in the way of his goal, innocent or not. But Ellie cannot allow herself to think even for 1 second that maybe Abby and her crew have the moral high ground here, because otherwise her plan unravels.
I don't know how I would have done all this without you.
Look at you.
Shut up.
I never would have let you do this by yourself. I'm glad I'm here too.
Like the Take on Me scene, it's moments like this that allow Dina and Ellie's closeness to shine through. Ellie expressing herself earnestly is rare, and Dina knows that. After a few tense conversations and dangerous interactions with the WLF, it's nice to see a moment of genuine connection, even if it's intertwined with some teasing, as it often is with these two. It's also one of the few times Ellie acknowledges that she's not alone, even though I think she feels that way a lot of the time.
I met this guy once, friend of Joel's. Tripwired a whole town.
How'd people get around?
It was just him.
Wait, he lived alone in an entire town?
He had trust issues.
That's sad.
Kept him alive.
It's not like you have to choose between being alive and being close to people. It's not black and white.
You take a risk, though, right?
You take a bigger risk being alone. Like, what if he got hurt? What if he got sick?
What happens if someone else gets hurt or sick? And you have this added, burden that puts you in a worse position.
Yeah, I guess that's also true.
I really wish this dialogue wasn't missable because it epitomizes the major difference between Dina and Ellie, and also contextualizes and foreshadows their fight at the theater. First of all, it's fascinating to see Ellie relate to and agree with Bill, considering they didn't exactly get along when last they met. But like Bill, Ellie has since been burned by someone she trusted. She has realized that there is risk in putting your faith in someone else. I think this is why she isn't able to let herself completely trust Dina, why she never fully lets her in.
Be careful who you put your faith in. The only people who can betray us are the ones we trust.
Though Dina is physically with Ellie and offering her support emotionally, Ellie still feels alone. She's alone in being immune. She believes she is alone in carrying Joel's burden. She doesn't tell Dina about what he did or about the complexity of her and Joel's relationship in general. She believes she's alone in wanting this revenge at any cost. And the more Dina casts doubt upon the mission, the more her instincts are validated. And Dina, who desires human connection, is also carrying a secret. Since she needs to be needed, to be useful to her loved ones, she fears the opposite being true. She fears becoming a burden, which is exactly what Ellie just confirmed she would be once her secret is revealed. Ellie has just told her how she will receive the news of Dina's pregnancy, and it's exactly as Dina feared, and the reason she kept it to herself as long as she did. This conversation for Ellie was theoretical, but for Dina, it was about to become a reality.
You okay?
Yeah, sorry, it's just that smell. What the fuck? That smell.
All right. You must have taken off on foot. You good to keep going?
Yeah, I'm fine. Please.
Dina immediately minimizes how she's feeling, lies about what caused her to throw up, and begs Ellie to carry on the mission to prove that she is still able to be useful. Granted, she doesn't need to push very hard, considering Ellie seems eager to continue regardless. Inside, Dina is probably freaking out right about now. Later on, after they find Leah's body at the TV station, they have this conversation.
Well, she's dead. How do you feel?
I'm pissed we couldn't talk to her.
Yeah. She didn't hurt Joel. It would have been pretty fucked up to make her talk.
She traveled hundreds of miles to torture him. I don't care whether she held the club or not.
I get it.
This is a callback to their conversation at the motel in Capitol Hill, where Dina questioned why the Salt Lake crew had left Ellie and Tommy alive.
Could be that you just weren't who they were looking for, so they let you go.
We'll later learn that Dina's hypothesis had been correct. that the Salt Lake crew had come to kill Joel and that was it. Leah was literally the only person in that room who did absolutely nothing during the whole chalet scene. She didn't hurt anyone and she didn't restrain anyone. But to Ellie, her presence in the room was crime enough. I've mentioned at the beginning of this video that Dina acts as Ellie's moral compass, and this is an early example that Ellie's veering off course. While Ellie's perspective on this is completely understandable, objectively when you start comparing details it's less black and white, which is one of the major points of this story.
Ellie, your mask! Here, we can share mine.
No!
Don't take it off! Ellie, stop! Ellie, stop! What? No! Ellie, no!
Stop! I'm not infected. I'm immune. I'm not coughing, do you see?
It's like she's committing suicide in front of you, is like what it is.
Oh,
like,
yeah. Because
you
as
know,
far as you know, she is.
Yeah, and so that's where that reaction came from, was he was like, she's killing herself in front of you, is what it looks like to you.
So Dina offering to share her mask isn't logical and wouldn't work, we know this. A broken mask in a spore-filled area is a death sentence, and I think Dina immediately slipped into denial by scrambling for a way she could possibly still save Ellie. And then when Ellie takes her mask off, there's no longer any sliver of hope in Dina's eyes that Ellie will survive this. Furthermore, Ellie seems to be choosing death, and Dina, who is scared out of her mind, nauseated, and exhausted, can't even wrap her mind around the explanation that Ellie is giving her. Now this next scene we're going to look at a little more in depth because there's a lot going on here. A lot of the concepts I've discussed so far are going to present themselves, and this is the first actual confrontation we will see between them.
You want to tell me what's going on with you?
What's going on with me? Ellie, I just saw you breathe spores.
Again, to Dina, breathing spores means death. Dina is saying, I just watched you kill yourself. Now you're infected. It's over.
I told you. I'm immune.
Okay, you're immune? Come on.
I was bitten a long time ago.
The fuck are you talking about?
I was bitten and nothing happened.
Dina can't even process what Ellie is saying to her because it's so preposterous. Dina is exhausted and actively trying not to throw up in this scene. She probably doesn't even immediately remember Ellie telling her about her bite mark back in Eugene's garden because as far as she was concerned, Ellie had just been kidding around. That had been such a significant moment for Ellie, but to Dina it hadn't really meant anything. It isn't until Ellie lowers her arm here, which catches Dina's attention, that she puts the pieces together.
The chemical burn.
Maria and Tommy and Joel are the only ones who know. Knew. Now you know.
This is Ellie's attempt to further prove what she's claiming. Other people know about this, it's not something she made up on her own. And the people who know are significant in Ellie's life. For all intents and purposes, Tommy, Maria, and Joel are Ellie's family, and now she's expressing that Dina is part of it too.
I can't get you infected if that's what you're worried about. Can't make you immune either.
This calls to mind Ellie's journal entries during the Finding Strings flashback 2 years prior. She'd been terrified when Kat had kissed her, afraid that the transfer of saliva would lead to Kat becoming infected. And it makes sense that Ellie might suspect this, given that the CBI does get passed on through the exchange of bodily fluids while biting. But after kissing Kat didn't result in her turning, Ellie deduced that she is not able to pass on her infection, at least through kissing, and she doesn't think she can make Dina immune either because
the only person who could develop a vaccine is dead.
Say something.
I want to point out that this is the last time Ellie and Dina will ever talk about Ellie's immunity on screen. There is no follow-up to Ellie's confession here. I'm not sure if that was an oversight on Naughty Dog's part, if it had been there at one point and didn't make the cut, or if it was done purposefully to demonstrate that the story isn't really about Ellie's immunity and never really was. I know there's also lots else going on in this particular moment, but I would have loved to have seen a callback to this at some point later on in the game.
Ellie. I think I'm pregnant.
I think Dina just comes out with it here because she is utterly overwhelmed. She's sick, she's tired, she can't fully process what Ellie's saying to her, and she knows her time of hiding it is up.
What? Don't worry, it's not yours.
This is a hilarious joke. The timing, though, not so great, but it's definitely not the first time we have seen Dina approach serious moments with humor. I think it's her attempt to soften the blow, to connect with Ellie in a way that is familiar, because they are currently navigating into unfamiliar territory. This is their first fight. Though they've been friends for a long time, I get the impression from Ellie's earlier journal entries that when something has gone wrong between them before, they never actually talked about it.
Hey, how come we never talked about this stuff?
And even if they had arguments before, it's different now. They're romantically involved. They're in a strange city. They've just had a very long, grueling day running for their lives. And Dina's having to confess something that she knows is going to throw a massive wrench in Ellie's plans.
What are we supposed to do now?
Nothing. I just need to rest for a second.
Are you fucking kidding? How long have you known?
I was late a few weeks ago.
A few weeks? We could have still turned back.
Well, I didn't know. I wasn't sure, okay? I didn't want to be a burden.
Well, you're a burden now, aren't you?
Ellie's frustration is understandable. This isn't something Dina should have kept to herself for so long, both for the sake of the trip, but also because it puts them at greater risk. For reference, it took about 6 weeks for Ellie and Dina to reach Seattle from Jackson, so Dina began to suspect she was pregnant about halfway through their trip. But it's also understandable why Dina bit her tongue. On top of there being other explanations for her symptoms other than pregnancy, and obviously a lack of any pregnancy tests to confirm her suspicions, she was terrified of being exactly what Ellie just called her, a burden. She didn't want to screw up Ellie's mission that she was supposed to be helping with, that Ellie, frankly, didn't ask Dina to help her with. Dina volunteered and then massively complicated things.
What happens if someone else gets hurt or sick? You have this added, burden that puts you in a worse position.
This is why I wish that earlier conversation hadn't been optional. This moment cuts that much deeper when you realize it's a callback to the moment where Ellie had unknowingly called Dina a burden, and now she's saying it with her whole chest to be hurtful. You can see right away that she regrets it, and there's an unspoken understanding between them that she's crossed a line, but she can't take it back. Because of the added context of their previous conversation, the subtext to Ellie's insult is that she would be better off alone. While that is a hurtful thing to say to anyone, especially to someone who has already sacrificed a whole lot to help you as Dina has, this is an especially deep cut for Dina because of her subconscious need to be useful to the people she loves and her fear of rejection. This journal entry of Ellie's supports my theory that she never, in fact, fully trusts Dina. She didn't up until this point, and she certainly won't afterwards. Dina withholding information was definitely a trigger point for Ellie, but there's also the issues I mentioned earlier that Ellie has putting her faith in others, because in her experience they have always lied to, betrayed, and or abandoned her. Ironically, Ellie is withholding a ton of information from Dina too, information which would recontextualize their entire trip and perhaps cause Dina to rethink her involvement. In a later journal entry, once Ellie gets information about the Salt Lake crew from Nora, which confirms her suspicions that they were connected to the Fireflies, Ellie will write that she doesn't want to confide in Dina or Jesse about it because she doesn't think they will understand. After their fight and while Ellie slept, Dina spent hours fixing the radio thanks to Eugene's tutelage and began to track the WLF's movements. Desperate to beat the burden allegations, Dina may be sick, but she can still be useful, even if it means having a morning sickness receptacle near her working area.
Hey. How hot do I look right now?
Dina once again tries to break the tension with humor.
Unit Romeo, you are requested at Site 2. Repeat, you are requested at Site 2. Confirm.
So, the numbers are locations. The TV station we were at, that's 6. There's a lot of chatter coming out of 2, so I'm assuming that's their home base.
This is Ellie's first real glimpse of how unwell Dina is. Now that she has recovered from her initial reaction to the pregnancy news, she offers her support with a gentle touch.
That helps.
Look. Last night was stupid.
Does this remind anyone of anything?
Just so we're clear about back there, it was either him or me.
You're welcome.
Look, I could grill Ellie for her non-apology here, but even though she doesn't actually say it, there is an unspoken apology in her words and in her touch. And Dina knows. I still would have loved Ellie to be a little more specific and actually take accountability, but given these circumstances, I'll go easy on her. What I will say though is that this sets the tone for how Ellie and Dina will handle conflict going forward, which is not to. Ellie will screw up and then come back, tail between her legs, and Dina, ever patient and understanding of Ellie's inner workings, will let it lie. Ellie will write about one such instance in her journal later on at the farm chapter. While I think there's the time and place for hashing things out in a relationship, and that not every conflict needs to be broken down, dealing with every issue in this manner isn't good for the long-term health of a partnership. It means one person avoids fully taking accountability or making significant changes to their problem-causing behavior, and the other consistently must circumvent their own feelings and needs in order to keep the peace.
Wait. Give me your hand. It's for good luck.
I don't believe in luck.
I do.
I think it's really interesting that Ellie says she doesn't believe in luck. It could simply be that she doesn't believe in charms or talismans which promise such things, but not believing in luck as a general concept is different. More than anything, this points yet again to a difference of perspective between them. Dina believes that hoping for good things to happen is still beneficial, whether by manifestation or safeguarding hope. Ellie believes that bad things are going to happen eventually no matter what you ask for, so why bother wishing for good things? It's also worth mentioning that Dina specifically gives Ellie a Hamza bracelet, which is a Middle Eastern symbol of protection against negative energies. Since Dina won't be able to accompany Ellie into this next chapter physically, she is offering Ellie a spiritual guide to keep her on a lighter path. Game design-wise, Dina being sick provides a great opportunity to get Ellie, and by extension the player, out into the world alone. Going on missions alone is going to amplify the sense of isolation that Ellie has been feeling within since Joel's death, and probably even before that. Without being perceived, especially by someone whose opinion matters to her, and without Dina around to keep Ellie in touch with her humanity, Ellie can freely express what she's actually feeling and indulge her darker thoughts.
Oh my god. Jesse.
Hey, Dina. Ooh.
Oh, hey. You okay?
Nothing a little sleep won't take care of.
We should get inside. Yeah, okay, come on. Easy. How'd you get past Maria?
I had to sneak out. My friend's problems are my problems.
Yeah.
I heard you're sick.
Oh, it's just a stomach thing. Come on. Let's sit you down, huh?
You don't need to do that.
Oh, shut up. So when'd you leave Jackson?
Day after you. But there was bad snow when I crossed into Oregon. I've been doing 18-hour stretches for the past 2 weeks trying to catch up.
Now you're just bragging.
I think this moment is often interpreted as Ellie being jealous of Dina and Jesse's connection, but I actually think it has more to do with her feeling isolated. She is running out of time to complete her mission, and perhaps she feels she is the only one who still cares about it. Once Jesse finds out that Dina is pregnant, Ellie knows he is going to insist on taking her home. The next chapter will be the Finding Strings flashback, during which time Jesse and Dina were still together, and Ellie felt like Dina was pulling away from her because Ellie was preoccupied with someone else. This situation could be a mirror for what's going on in the present day. Perhaps Ellie feels disconnected from Dina, and seeing her easily drop into familiarity and caregiving with Jesse, with whom she has a past and also now ostensibly a future, further widens the divide.
Jesse's passed out. Hey, let me do that.
He's a good guy. Why didn't you tell him? Wasn't the right time.
This was a moment of insecurity for Ellie, who was trying to gauge how Dina feels about seeing Jesse now that she knows she's carrying his kid. It's her turn to ask, silently, does this change anything for you? And Dina essentially answers that no, it doesn't. She's still with Ellie, and Jesse's presence won't change that. I think that's part of the reason she says it wasn't the right time to tell Jesse, because this trip is supposed to be about helping Ellie, and she doesn't want to make it about herself. She also probably didn't want to drop that bomb on him immediately after a mission and while he was injured, and maybe she just wasn't ready to tell him herself. I also want to point out that Ellie was tending to her own wounds by herself while Dina took care of Jesse, but as soon as Dina came back, she took over immediately. This small moment demonstrates Ellie's tendency to do difficult things by herself without waiting or asking for help, and Dina's compulsion to be the one helping. Dina is really trying to remain connected to Ellie, while Ellie is becoming more closed off as her sense of isolation grows. Remember that Dina doesn't have the full picture of anything that's really going on with Ellie. She doesn't know what happened at the hospital, she doesn't know the extent of what Ellie's immunity had almost meant, she doesn't know the intricacies of Ellie's relationship with Joel, and she doesn't yet know the depth of Ellie's despair as she carries it all. She doesn't know Ellie's burden.
Wait, you're gonna go now?
Yeah, we have a lead.
Like, at least just wait for Jessie to rest up.
She could be gone by then.
Ellie.
We know her location. Maybe Tommy does too. What?
Nothing.
Good. Can you come help me with the door, please?
Yep.
Dina sees right through Ellie in this moment. She sees that nothing has deterred Ellie from her goal, despite the presence of multiple dangerous factions and her friends being sick and or injured. She sees that Ellie is using Tommy as a scapegoat to continue pursuing revenge. And she sees that fighting with her won't do anything but push Ellie further away, so she concedes.
And we need to get these kids back to their families. Is there something else you'd like to rehash?
No.
Good.
In this scene, Joel manipulates Ellie by bringing focus back to the dead teenagers at their feet, making the issue bigger than the two of them. Then he basically dares Ellie to keep fighting him, but she doesn't, and I think he knew she wouldn't.
We know her location. Maybe Tommy does too. What?
Nothing.
Good.
Ellie is borrowing the same manipulation tactic Joel used on her to get what she wants out of Dina in this moment, bringing up Tommy to try and make the issue bigger than the two of them, and challenging her to keep fighting a losing battle, knowing she won't. In both of these cases, the consequence of pursuing the argument would be to widen the divide between the conflicting parties, and both Dina and teenage Ellie in those respective moments were too afraid to do that. And I think both Joel and present-day Ellie knew that, meaning they were using their loved one's fears to their advantage. Frankly, this is an abusive tactic. To Dina's credit though, I do think she gave in part because she hoped Ellie would figure things out on her own, that the dark path she was wandering wouldn't serve her, and that she would return ready to go home, which I think is how she interprets Ellie's behavior when she returns from the hospital.
I made her talk.
It's okay.
I don't want to lose you.
Ellie has just done something horrific. Something that she joked about doing only a day earlier, something we know Tommy is capable of, something we saw Joel do in the first game without breaking a sweat, something Abby did in the name of justice, something which, if you haven't developed strategies to turn off your conscience, will take a piece of your soul. Ellie feels monstrous, traumatized by her own capacity for violence, and is terrified that what she has done will cost her the one close relationship she has left. And Dina, who once again tends to Ellie's wounds, asks no questions. She speaks to Ellie like she would a frightened child. touches her like she would a wounded animal, offers her forgiveness and understanding without knowing the full scope of what she has done. Perhaps she doesn't want to know, because she doesn't want Ellie to lose her either. Once again, the pair opt to leave some things unsaid in order to preserve their relationship. And I think Dina interprets Ellie's admission of being afraid to lose her as a sign that she is ready to let this vendetta rest in order to prevent that. And perhaps in this moment, Ellie means it.
How old were you when you first killed someone?
10?
Wow. What happened?
Guy was coming at my mom. I stabbed him.
Stop! She had nothing to do with it.
Maybe the memory of saving her mother was triggered for Dina here, which is why she burst in and attacked Abby with a knife, risking her own life and that of her babies to save someone she cannot emotionally afford to lose. And she very, very narrowly escapes this confrontation with her life. The farm sequence at first is pretty bewildering. All this feels a little too perfect, almost surreal after the violent misery that has taken place over the past couple dozen hours of gameplay. I remember thinking, there's a reason I'm still playing, because otherwise the game would be over. If you're like me, you may have been instantly suspicious of the idyllic life portrait Naughty Dog was painting. And of course, there's a reason for that. Upcoming events, and especially Ellie's journal entries, will reveal that there's a lot going on under the surface that's not being directly addressed by the characters. A year has passed, give or take, since the fight at the theater. Ellie and Dina have recovered from their physical wounds. Dina has had her baby, and they've established a homestead on the outskirts of Jackson. While the player might be wishing that this is endgame and the characters are in a good place, I think on some level the characters themselves are hoping for the same thing. They are trying to be happy as best as they can. Isolated from their community in Jackson, they've seemingly fulfilled Dina's dream of fixing up a farm and enjoying plenty of space for themselves. Perhaps they were hoping to start over in a place that's just theirs, away from prying eyes and sympathetic glances, and to give their relationship a fresh start once again. But trauma, as we've learned, will follow us everywhere if we don't confront it. It happened again. I was hunting this boar and I'd cornered it in this old gas station. It was bleeding out. Screaming. Sounded like him. I couldn't get the images out of my head. I left it there dying. When will this stop? When we first see Ellie in this new chapter, she is gazing forlornly at Joel's broken watch, which she then puts under some clothes in a drawer. Is that just where she stores it for safekeeping, or is she hiding it? Later on, Ellie will pull her journal out of a box under her art desk. The things that Ellie carried with her on her person throughout the entire Seattle chapter have now been put away, hidden out of sight, and she only takes them out when she is alone. This could be symbolic of her burying or putting away her memories of Seattle and Joel and the depth of her struggle, hiding them from Dina and only allowing herself to think on them when she's by herself. I don't know how Dina talks so easily about Jesse. She tells JJ all about him. She thinks it'd be good for me to talk about Joel, to get it out. When she says that, it makes the memories sound like food poisoning. I don't want to talk about it. It's just gonna hurt. And I think once I'd start, I wouldn't be able to stop. When we first see Dina, she is doing dishes while Ellie wanders around with the baby. Throughout this chapter, we will see Dina cleaning dishes, washing and hanging laundry, keeping track of the livestock's feeding schedule, and minding the baby's needs. I'm not implying that Ellie doesn't help with household chores at all, but it's worth noting that we don't see her doing it in the game. The exception is when she goes to herd the sheep into the barn, which she only does when Dina asks her to do it. I get the sense that Dina is shouldering responsibility for a lot of the labor that needs to be done day to day, from farm duties the childcare and delegates tasks to Ellie.
Ooh, look at those moves.
These moves?
Yeah.
I do believe there is genuine joy in these moments. But as we gleaned from Ellie's journal entries, Dina has been trying to get Ellie to talk about her feelings, and Ellie hasn't been able to do that. The lack of emotional intimacy between them could cause Dina to feel disconnected from Ellie, which goes against her need for deep connections with her loved ones. Ellie won't tell her what's going on inside. She won't let Dina in. Instead, Ellie shows her love and appreciation via touch and physical intimacy, which we see Dina accept to a point, and then she pushes Ellie away. This happens more than once. Ellie makes several passes at her during this chapter, and Dina rejects her every time. Women, especially, can have a hard time connecting physically with their partner when emotionally things aren't aligned, and I think we can see that struggle here with Dina.
Okay, enough. Seriously?
Jesse's parents came out today. It was nice at first. They're good people. But then they started pushing for us to move back to Jackson. I couldn't handle it and I left for the woods. I didn't come back until late at night. Dina stayed up for me. I could tell she was mad, but she grabbed my hand and led me to bed. I feel so guilty. It's unclear if by Dina leading Ellie to bed she meant to sleep or to be intimate, but if it was the latter, this could be an indication of Dina meeting Ellie where she was at, connecting physically because she feels utterly cut off from Ellie's internal world. It also demonstrates a lot of patience on Dina's part, as well as the continuation of her tendency to bury her own feelings in order to placate Ellie. My dear Dina, I appreciate the tender words in your letter. I will say what I hope is obvious. Jesse wouldn't blame you for what happened, and neither do any of us. We love you. There will always be place for you, Ellie, and JJ back in Jackson should you ever change your mind. This letter from Jesse's mother, as well as that journal entry of Ellie's, tells us that the Young family is under some pressure to return to Jackson. There could be several reasons for this, not the least of which could be that Jesse's parents want to be closer to their grandson. It could be that his parents, who know Dina quite well, can tell she is struggling in her current situation, and perhaps isn't receiving the support she needs from Ellie. It also indicates that in a previous correspondence, Dina had expressed some guilt for the death of their son. Guilt for Jesse's death is likely one of the reasons the Young family left Jackson to begin with. Perhaps Ellie couldn't bear to face Jesse's parents believing she's the reason their son is dead, especially since she has taken on the role of parent to JJ in his place. But there seems to be no love lost between them all, with Jesse's mother including Ellie in the invitation for the Young family to return to Jackson. The question of whether they should reintegrate into Jackson or stay at the farm on their own offers an external, macro view of the core conflict between Ellie and Dina. Will Ellie open up and let Dina in, or will she remain isolated and cut off from Dina emotionally?
That poor baby. Yeah.
We had a lot of conversations here about Ellie's thought process, the things she's not expressing, but she put the baby's life at risk right now, right? It's like, who knows what, and when she's in this fog of PTSD, what she could have done.
This is the moment for Ellie where it's
never going to get better.
It's not going to get better, and she's put her family in danger. So it's probably better to just go.
Let's just bring in the...
It's okay.
Here we go. It's okay. Hey. Oh, man. It's good. Haven't had any excitement in a while.
Still coming in with an attempt at humor, we can then see Dina's facade very visibly crack.
There's something important in the scene for Dina, right? Because Dina has been such an amenable partner through so much of this game and their journey, and even when Ellie's off the deep end, Dina is a nurturing force. And here she's finally drawing the line.
We're done with that, Sarah.
She's finally like, we're done with that. I'm speaking for Ellie now.
There's a line here, and you've crossed it.
And like the rage I felt too when he keeps going, I was like, it's insidious. You know, it's like he came and brought the virus back into the house and now she's sick again.
Hey, what the fuck was that?
Nothing.
God damn it, Tommy, you know what we've been through.
I'll save it. She made me a promise.
I don't fucking care.
I know you don't, Dina. That's your goddamn problem.
Listen.
Oh yeah, I'm all fucking ears.
You don't come back here with that shit to my house ever again. Do you understand me?
So, we have finally arrived at the final scene between Ellie and Dina, which we will give a full analysis. We've already covered many of the given circumstances, which in storytelling include any preceding events which inform and influence the character's actions in a scene. Earlier that day, Tommy showed up and offered Ellie the out she has been looking for, and Dina has likely been afraid all day that Ellie will take it. Now, Dina has caught Ellie in the kitchen, fully dressed, packing her backpack. She already knows what's going on. Ellie was planning to leave in the middle of the night, perhaps without even saying goodbye.
I would argue this is maybe Ellie's darkest moment, even though I know where we're going, because this is the choice where she forsakes.
This is where she makes the choice.
Yeah. And I think she knows there's a very good chance she's going to die on this journey.
I guess the thing that we don't talk about is like, I think she's suicidal.
Yeah, I
think
agree.
There's the guilt of what should have happened at the hospital.
That's why she leaves in the middle of the night. She's not saying goodbye because it's clearly suicide.
Yeah. When the pain gets too loud, she's not there anymore. She's incredibly vulnerable, but she's completely disassociated, and there is this absolute rejection of everything that is right.
When I talk about desired outcomes, I'm talking about the way each character wants the scene to end. This can shift and change depending on what happens in the scene, but in this case, Ellie's and Dina's desired outcomes are quite clear. Dina wants Ellie to stay, and Ellie wants Dina to let her go. And now, at long last, we will analyze the subtext, which is the underlying meaning to any given line of dialogue.
Hey.
Hey. Man, it's been a while since he slept this long, huh?
He had a day.
Yeah. He's fine. Go back to bed. Talk about it in the morning, okay?
As we've seen Dina do several times already, she enters a difficult conversation with a touch of humor, and we can actually see her decide to do that here. Bringing up JJ triangulates him in this conversation, a reminder that they aren't the only two people in this family, and speaks to a challenge they have faced together. While getting an infant to sleep consistently isn't the same as dealing with trauma, it still demonstrates that as partners they can overcome adversity together, even if the short-term solution is just to sleep on it, as Dina suggests here. Part of Dina's strategy in helping Ellie has been to never push her too hard, all the while thinking that if she just gives Ellie enough time, Ellie will eventually pass through the stages of her grief and come back to her. That said, Dina doesn't exactly look surprised to find Ellie packing her bag in the middle of the night. After Tommy's visit, she may have expected it. I think part of Dina hopes she can approach this moment as she has the other times Ellie has been unwell, with levity, patience, and an invitation to rest. But the other part of her knows what Ellie will confirm in the next line, which is that Ellie is serious about this. Dina has run out of time, but she still tries to buy just a little bit more, even if it's just to postpone the conversation to the morning.
I have to finish it.
You don't owe Tommy anything.
It's logical for Dina to assume that Ellie is doing this because of Tommy's earlier visit that day. That conversation not only provided Ellie with a lead of Abby's whereabouts, but it also triggered her own sense of guilt about what befell her companions in Seattle. But I think for Ellie, ultimately it's less about owing something to Tommy than it is owing it to Joel to finish what she started and avenge him. It also may be less painful for Dina to blame Tommy for this, but just as Tommy made his own decision to go to Seattle alone, Ellie is now making her own choice to leave the farm. Tommy is no more to blame for Ellie's choice than Ellie was for Tommy's.
I don't sleep. I don't eat. I'm not like you, Dina.
I think at first this line could come across as accusatory, like Ellie is saying, I can't function like you, I can't sweep everything under the rug and pretend everything is okay. I think this might also be how Dina receives this line, but I think Ellie, who blames herself for most things at this point, is more likely saying she perceives Dina as being very strong, able to cope with it much more gracefully than Ellie can, and that in comparison, Ellie is weak.
What? You think this is easy? For you and for him, I deal with it.
Like I said, Dina receives Ellie's line like an accusation that she either is fine or is acting like she's fine. But of course, Dina is not fine. She almost died in Seattle, had to recover from the injuries Abby inflicted on her, gave birth after all that, has since taken on so much labor and responsibility at the farm and as a parent, is grieving the death of her baby's father and the man who was her partner for years, and has been living isolated with Ellie, who is mentally ill and refuses to let her in. Through it all, Dina has been patient and kind and supportive, all the while dealing with her own trauma, which is just as present and valid as Ellie's. Dina has found her own way to cope, maybe through prayer, communicating with Jesse's parents, or throwing herself into work on the farm, and she does all this so that she can take better care of Ellie and JJ. In a way, she is repeating the same behavior we inferred from her relationship with her sister. Dina had to deal with her own shit in order to care for her sister Talia, who was mentally ill. I think this is all feeding into her fatal flaw, her need to be needed, at the expense of her own well-being. In an emergency on a plane, they always say you must first put on your own oxygen mask before helping someone else with theirs. That's because you can't help anyone if you yourself are asphyxiating. With Dina, though she has coping strategies, it seems like they may only be working enough to keep her functional for the people in her life. But is she actually receiving the emotional care and support she really needs to be okay? And how long can she carry all this weight in the meantime?
I love you.
Prove it. Stay.
I can't.
Put simply, I think Dina believes if Ellie truly loved her, she wouldn't leave her. But I think Ellie believes she's leaving because she loves Dina, and that Dina and the baby would be better off without her. Due to her trauma, her PTSD episodes, and her inability or refusal to talk about it with anyone, Ellie believes she has become a burden to her family.
It's not like you have to choose between being alive and being close to people. It's not black and white.
You take a risk, though, right?
You take a bigger risk being alone. Like, what if he got hurt? What if he got sick?
What happens if someone else gets hurt or sick? And you have this added, burden that puts you in a worse position.
We've seen their differing perspectives on this matter play out in both ways now. Ellie sticks to her philosophy, even when this time it's she who is sick and unable to meet the needs of her loved ones. So she is choosing to be alone, thinking she'll be leaving Dina in a better position.
So what? I'm just supposed to sit here and wait for you? For God knows how long, just thinking you're fucking dead the entire time?
Essentially, Dina is saying, what about me? Or what do you expect me to do? Is Ellie asking her to wait? Has she even considered how this will impact Dina?
I don't plan on dying.
This line of Ellie's is interesting. It contradicts the given circumstance that Neil Druckmann mentioned, which is that Ellie is borderline suicidal at this point. My best guess as to why she said this is that she hasn't quite admitted that to herself yet. Maybe she denies it so forcefully because Dina got too close to the painful truth. Maybe she thinks dying would mean she failed to kill Abby again, and she has no intention of failing this time.
Yeah, well, neither did Jesse. Or Joel.
This is the beginning of Dina's breaking point. It's the only time we ever really see Dina lose her composure with Ellie. I think this was an eruption of all the resentment Dina has been subconsciously holding on to since Seattle. Dina literally risked her life accompanying Ellie on that trip, and she lost the father of her child, one of her best friends. With all they have been through together and everything Dina has done for Ellie, she is distraught that it wasn't enough, that Ellie is choosing to leave anyway. And while I don't think Dina is intentionally trying to hurt Ellie here, she is asserting a point. Nobody whom they have lost so far planned on dying. It can happen to anyone, anytime, especially in a world like this. Jesse and Joel both died as a result of other people pursuing revenge. And though really Ellie isn't fully responsible for either death, I think Dina knows she blames herself regardless. Dina bringing up Joel's and Jesse's deaths here in that accusatory way causes Ellie to completely shut down.
Hey, stop. Hey, come on. We've got a family. She doesn't get to be more important than that.
Realizing that she lost Ellie with that last comment, and that her biggest fear is about to be realized, Dina desperately clamors for another tactic to stop Ellie from leaving her, triangulating JJ again, reminding Ellie of her responsibilities to her son, but it's too late. Mirroring the scene at Joel's grave, Ellie removes Dina's hand from her face, completely dissociating from the moment.
No. I'm not gonna do this again.
That's up to you.
In one final heartbreaking bid, Dina offers an ultimatum. I'm not going to watch you destroy yourself again. If you leave, it's over. And Ellie's response is, basically, that's your choice, and I've made mine. And Dina can't even bear to watch as Ellie walks out the door.
Philosophically, with this game, what we wanted to do was allow our characters to make immoral choices that the audience would not be on board with. Up until now, like, we shed some of the audience of, like, you know, the Nora torture. Some people have issues with that, or certain other kind of violent moments. But here we lose almost everybody. And it is by design in that way of, like, you're now, like, playing this thing that you are not on board with at all. You have to keep going. And in a way that does align you with Ellie.
Would it have been better if I'd stayed? Swallowed up the shame, given them what's left of me? Do I still have it to give? Can I offer the scraps now, gristle and bone, chewed up and rotting? Or will it make them sick, corrode their insides, poison them? I could be in the woods, left for the insects to clean, until the iron smell is gone, until I'm bleached and brittle, ready to display. This is Ellie's final journal entry in the game, and it's already in her journal when she returns from Santa Barbara. A short poem, it offers much insight into how Ellie is feeling about returning to the farm. Ellie wonders whether, if she had simply grit her teeth and endured, giving Dina and JJ as much of herself as she could, would life have gotten better? She wonders whether they will accept her as she is now, a husk of herself but still alive, or will her presence ruin things for them? The alternative, she muses, would be for her to have died. In previous journal entries, Ellie has referred to the smell of iron, the smell of Joel's blood. She's saying death would have been the only way for her to truly escape the trauma of Joel's death, and that she could have gone that direction, but instead she persists. A husk, but alive no less. Will that be enough for Dina and JJ? I've seen several theories about this epilogue and what it signifies. Lots of people noted that Ellie is wearing Dina's good luck charm again, but wasn't wearing it in California. Due to that and Ellie's change of clothes and lack of gear, some believe she went to Jackson first and only returned to the farm to collect her guitar. Many believe this means she and Dina have made up off screen. I think Ellie is wearing the bracelet because it means good luck, and having gone through an emotional and spiritual upheaval, Ellie is willing to try anything to have something go her way. It's a nod to Dina, to her optimism and philosophies, and quite simply a sign that Ellie is returning to the farm with the intent of asking Dina to take her back. But she finds the house empty. Another reason some people believe they already got back together is because they don't think Ellie has a reaction to seeing the empty house. But I'd argue that this is her reaction. A long exhale, disappointed but not surprised. Exhausted. Though she may have been hoping Dina would be there, I think part of her knew she wouldn't be. To me, it's obvious that Dina returned to Jackson to stay with Jesse's parents. And why wouldn't she? It wouldn't be safe or practical for her to stay on the farm alone with a baby. She could instead return to a familiar place, have a family, and focus on raising her son somewhere safe and secure, and where she will have the support she has been lacking for over a year. Though Dina didn't leave a note, she did leave a message. Dina emptied the entire house save for Ellie's belongings, which she left packed up in Ellie's art room. To me, this conveys Dina officially separating herself from Ellie and shutting the door in this part of her life. There's hurt in this gesture, for sure, and perhaps anger, together, but I don't think there's animosity. But to me, it doesn't leave room for them to rekindle the relationship. Dina offered the ultimatum and Ellie made her choice. And to be honest, I'm glad to see Dina stick to it. I've seen a few people call Dina selfish for leaving Ellie. If you really feel this way, I would remind you that Ellie in fact left first, and that I'm sure a big factor in Dina's decision to leave was in the best interests of her infant son. It was the only time we see Dina put herself before Ellie in the entire game. She put up with a hell of a lot, and in the end she got to decide what was best for her and her family. I truly think this was an empowering ending for Dina, and I hope wherever she has found some peace. She deserves that after everything she has endured, as does Ellie. And in that regard, I think the ending is much more hopeful than some believe, but I'll save that analysis for another video. Though this was a heartbreaking way for Ellie and Dina's story to end, as I mentioned before, I do think it was ultimately the right thing for both of them. Ellie wasn't getting any better, and Dina was wringing herself dry trying to hold everything together. She fought so hard for so long and sacrificed so much for Ellie. In the end though, there wasn't anything anyone else could have done for Ellie. Dina needed to do what was best for her and her son, and Ellie needed to find her own path and walk it alone. With all of that being said, it is true that one of the major themes in this game is forgiveness, so who knows? Maybe Dina will have it in herself to take Ellie back. If indeed there is a Last of Us Part 3, I'm personally of the opinion that Dina and JJ and perhaps even Jackson as a whole won't be in it, but that's something I would be happy to be proven wrong about. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please interact with it, as this helps me out a lot. I don't know when the next video will be ready, but in the meantime, I hope you'll check out my other ones and follow me on TikTok. And until next time, endure and survive.